It's Thursday, the 9th of November 2023. Welcome to the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed Business News, where we give you the top 5 business stories that you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Adam Lang, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Adam.
Sean, story number 1 this morning. The massive outage at Optus has sent the country's second largest telco into crisis mode, with customers, governments and businesses all demanding answers.
The massive outage affected millions of users, including preventing people with fixed lines from calling 000 in an emergency. The company's boss, Kelly Bayer Rosmarin, said it wasn't a cyber attack. She would know, because remember, a year ago, Optus suffered a massive cyber attack, but rather a very, very rare occurrence. Communications Minister Michelle Rowland urged Optus to be transparent and timely in updates to customers, adding the company appeared to have suffered from a fault deep in the core of its network. She said businesses should keep receipts of any additional expenses incurred as a result of the outages. Now, services have gradually been restored. A big part of the problem yesterday was lack of communication. Outage started about 4 a.m. There was a statement on Facebook at about 6:47 a.m., more than 2.5 hours later. That wasn't updated for several hours. The outage affected Optus mobile, fixed internet and phone services. That means phone users were unable to make or receive calls or use the internet on Optus's mobile network. Resellers like Coles Mobile were affected too, so too Dodo and Aussie Broadband customers.
Sean, there were so many impacts across the country. Where do you start? A disaster for Optus and a disaster for its customers.
Well said. Some trains in Melbourne came to a halt as a result of the outage. Westpac, ANZ and Commonwealth Bank all use Optus for telco services. They couldn't take or make calls from their call centres, for example. Some businesses, my local coffee shop, in fact, couldn't use their mobile payment terminals. Customers couldn't get verification text messages. All in all, an estimated 10 million people were affected. Now, a few things to think about. Australia's small, has limited number of providers of essential services. Bit of a worry that we also rely a hell of a lot on technology. We worked that out yesterday just for good measure. Don't you think Optus would be better at handling a crisis, at least via communicating better after last year's cyber attack?
Sean, story number 2. Anthony Albanese has given the green light to a new Australia-China visa deal to make it easier for visitors and business people to travel between the countries.
He made the announcement as he was leaving Beijing and before heading to the Pacific Islands Forum in Rarotonga in the Cook Islands. The Prime Minister was due to drop Foreign Minister Penny Wong in Tokyo to brief her Japanese counterpart on the China trip. In Mr. Albanese's final meeting of his 3-day visit, he and Chinese Premier Li Qiang agreed they'd meet annually, restoring what had been a standing arrangement that collapsed with the breakdown of bilateral relations after 2019. Annual ministerial meetings on foreign, strategic and economic matters will also resume, while new reciprocal 3 to 5 year multi-entry visas will kickstart business travel and hopefully bring more Chinese students and tourists to Australia.
Sean, story number 3. Streaming platforms like Netflix, Disney Plus and Amazon Prime cut their spending on Australian TV shows and films last financial year, and that's despite Labor's plans to force them to make more.
New figures released yesterday by the media regulator show Disney Plus, Netflix, Paramount Plus, Amazon Prime Video and Stan spent a combined $324 million on about 1,600 Aussie programs last financial year, but it was down from $335 million. Now, spend on Australian-related shows. There's shows that are partly Australian. Disney's Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was one. Obi-Wan Kenobi was another. That spend actually jumped about $120 million, according to a report in the Financial Review. Arts Minister Tony Burke and Communications Minister Michelle Rowland have said they'll introduce quotas to come into effect from July next year. The push for quotas has provoked widespread opposition from streaming platforms and free-to-air television networks, which have claimed they'll push up production costs for everyone.
Sean, story number 4. Building materials group James Hardie's share price jumped 14% yesterday, even though its net profit for the 6 months to the end of September was down 6%.
Yes, investors like this result, particularly the parts where James Hardie could lift the prices of materials it sells. In Australia, it passed through a whopping 15% price increase. While the 6-month result was lower, the final 3 months was actually better. And boss Aaron Erter said he expects renovation work to rebound later next year as homeowners adjust to higher interest rates. He said the company is gaining market share with its wall cladding and plasterboard products. Now, James Hardie makes about 2/3 of its profits in North America. Erter said there's going to be a downturn in that region of between 7 and 14%, but then it'll bounce back.
Sean, story number 5. An Alpha group of staff on an AACo property allegedly routinely bullied, intimidated and harassed their peers, and that's according to an internal safety report from the group.
And a gay contractor working for AACo was allegedly exposed to homophobic slurs while working on one of its outback properties. That same contractor was also allegedly left to work on roofs for hours alone without communications. according to notes of the incidents reported in the Australian Financial Review. AACo owns and operates feedlots and farms covering around 7 million hectares in Queensland and Northern Territory. That's about 1% of Australia's landmass. It's got a herd of about 433,000 cattle. Other internal documents detail that a young worker at another property was injured and left unable to walk for days after being pinned between a charging cow and a boulder. He was taken to a clinic eventually and airlifted to Darwin after a veteran boar runner, typically not at the site, saw the injured worker and told him to go to a clinic. It's very distressing, that report, Adam.
That's it, the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Adam.
It's Thursday, the 9th of November 2023. Remember to hit follow on the podcast, and if 5 minutes is not enough, then find our longer podcast called Fear and Greed on your favourite podcast platform. I'm Adam Lang, and that was the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed Business News. We hope you have a great day.